A wise man must be able to carry his peace within himself. Diogenes of Sinope. What if everything you were taught about love was a lie? What if the pursuit, the sacrifice, the aching hope wasn't proof of your passion, but a symptom of your conditioning? You were raised to believe that real men win women not through clarity, but through performance. From the moment you understood what attraction was, the script was handed to you: chase her, impress her, earn her. Movies showed you the underdog hero getting the girl. Songs told you that your heartbreak made you noble. And everyone clapped when you gave too much, as if your suffering was a badge of honor. But no one warned you that this chase would cost you your soul. You started with innocence. You saw her, and you wanted to be seen. You thought being chosen would complete you. So you began to shape yourself softer here, funnier there, a little quieter when she pulled away, a little louder when she didn't notice. And somewhere along the line you stopped being a man and started being a mirror. This is not a story of romance. It's a story of recovery from illusion, from obedience, from the hollow ache of trying to be enough for someone who was never meant to define you. And in this story, Diogenes walks with us. It begins so early you barely notice it. Before you even understand what love is, you're told how a man should earn it, not receive it. Earn it through pursuit, through sacrifice, through silent endurance. You're taught directly, or through cultural whispers, that your worth as a man is tied to your ability to be desired not for who you are, but for how well you perform. From fairy tales to Hollywood blockbusters, the message repeats like a prayer: a man must win the woman, chase her, prove himself, bleed if he has to. And so you internalize it. You learn to measure your value through her eyes. Her smile becomes your sunrise. Her approval, your oxygen. You don't notice how deeply this mindset roots itself. You laugh louder when she's near. You speak less when she pulls away. You contort. You chase. You mistake this performance for passion. But it's not love you're chasing. It's validation. It's permission to feel worthy, if only for a moment. No one ever told you that this dynamic would cost you something sacred: your center, yourself. They told you that longing makes you human, but they didn't say that obsession makes you hollow. This is the tragedy modern men inherit, not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned. You were never taught to build from within, to be whole first. You were taught to chase wholeness in someone else's gaze. You thought finding the right woman would complete you. But it wasn't love. It was a transaction. Here is my time, my devotion, my identity. Please give me something to feel like a man. And that's where the damage begins. Because the moment she becomes your mirror, you disappear when she does. When she leaves, you don't just lose her. You lose the version of yourself that only felt real in her presence. You start to ask questions no one prepared you for. Who am I without her smile, without her texts, without the hope that one day she'll finally see me? This isn't masculinity. It's dependency wrapped in roses. Diogenes the philosopher, who walked barefoot through the streets of Athens, understood this far before us. He saw how men chained themselves not with iron but with illusion. And he laughed not to mock but to awaken. Because what you were taught to chase was never love. It was escape from yourself. They told you the chase was noble, that the pursuit itself was proof of your masculinity, of your passion, your devotion, your worth. And so you believed it. You believed the man who waited, who pined, who bled silently for a woman's affection was somehow more admirable than the one who stood still, whole and content. But what they never told you, what they conveniently left out, is that this game was designed to break you. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly. You start by giving a little more than you should. A few extra texts, a few changed plans, then you bend, then you stretch. And before long, you're no longer the man you were, you're the man you hope she'll want. The pursuit is seductive not because it works, but because it gives you just enough to keep going. A smile here, a reply there, a breadcrumb that keeps your hunger alive. You think you're in control, but you're not. You think this is about love, but it's not. This is about approval addiction, about emotional gambling. You're rolling dice with your soul, hoping one more gesture, one more compliment, one more act of service will finally make her stay. But deep down, you know the truth. Every time you chase harder, she pulls further away. Not because she's cruel, but because instinctively, we don't respect what is desperate to please. And here's where it becomes a trap. You don't just lose her, you lose you. The more effort you pour into the illusion, the more invested you become in its success. You can't stop chasing, because stopping would mean admitting it was never real. And so, you run faster, offer more, until your self-worth is tied entirely to a woman who may never truly see you. That's not love, that's psychological captivity. Diogenes saw this centuries ago. While other philosophers theorized about virtue and the stars, he walked barefoot through the city unchained and unmoved, pointing at men like us, men enslaved not by laws, but by longing. He mocked us not out of cruelty, but out of mercy, because he knew the man who chases is not alive. He is acting out a script written by a world that profits off his emptiness. And until you step off that stage, until you stop running in circles chasing a reflection, you will remain trapped not by her, but by the lie that taught you to run in the first place. While most men were busy perfecting their masks, Diogenes burned his. In a world obsessed with appearance validation and the relentless climb toward approval, he chose detachment not as rebellion, but as revelation. He walked barefoot through the dirt of Athens, slept in a barrel, mocked kings, and barked at passers-by like a dog. And yet in that madness, there was clarity, a man untouched by illusion. He was not chasing status, not worshiping beauty, not bending for love. He was free. And that is why his life still matters. Diogenes didn't reject women. He rejected dependence. He refused the idea that a man must contort himself to be seen, to be accepted, to be chosen. He looked around at men desperate, decorated, eager for attention, and saw them not as lovers, but as slaves. Slaves to desire, slaves to longing, slaves to the lie that said, you are nothing until someone else says you're something. And instead of playing the game, he laughed at it. This wasn't nihilism, it was liberation. You see, Diogenes didn't need to be loved to know his worth. He didn't need a woman's approval to feel masculine. That's why even Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, stood before him and asked if he could do anything for him. And what did Diogenes say? He didn't flatter, he didn't kneel, he didn't perform. He simply replied, yes, stand out of my sunlight. That is freedom in its rawest form. The ability to need nothing from the world that tries to own you. And it terrifies people. Because a man who needs nothing cannot be manipulated. A man who doesn't seek validation cannot be controlled. And a man who finds peace without a partner becomes something rare, not bitter, but unshakable. That's why Diogenes remains so dangerous. Not because of what he did, but because of what he exposed. He stripped away the performance. He rejected the pedestal. He lived without apology, without fear, and without chasing ghosts in perfume. So the question isn't just, who was Diogenes? The real question is, what part of you still lives like the men he mocked? Because until you find the courage to burn the mask, until you stop chasing and start standing, you will never taste the kind of freedom that Diogenes died owning. At some point, quietly, without even realizing it, you began to outsource your identity. Not to a job, not to a purpose, but to her. Her smile, her text, her gaze across the room. Somewhere along the line, her reaction to you became your reflection of yourself. If she laughed at your joke, you were funny. If she responded warmly, you were lovable. If she pulled away, you started to question your worth. This is the invisible contract modern men have signed without reading the terms. I'll give you my soul. Just give me back a version of myself I can be proud of. But here's the tragedy. No one tells you what happens when she becomes your mirror. When she leaves, she doesn't just take her presence. She takes your confidence, your clarity, the illusion that you were finally enough. Because you didn't love her. You loved how you felt next to her. You loved the reflection she offered, not the reality of who she was. And when that reflection disappeared, you were left standing in front of a shattered mirror, unsure if you even existed without her. This is what Diogenes saw centuries ago. Men who depended on women not for connection, but for completion. Men who bowed, begged, shape-shifted, and called it romance. He mocked it not to belittle love, but to expose the false idol it had become. He knew that any identity built on another's perception is no identity at all. It's a costume stitched together from compliments and fears. That's why Diogenes could walk naked in daylight and feel whole, because his sense of self wasn't for sale. It didn't fluctuate with someone else's silence. He didn't crumble at rejection. He didn't need to be seen to feel real. But you learned to crave being seen because you never learned to see yourself. This is the wound beneath the pursuit, not a hunger for intimacy, but a desperation to feel valid. And no matter how beautiful she is, no matter how kind, she can never give you what you were meant to find within. Because love can nourish you, but it was never meant to define you. Until you stop measuring your manhood by her approval, you will live at the mercy of her moods. You will orbit her like a lost moon, forgetting that you were once a sun burning with your own fire long before she ever looked your way. You tell yourself it's love, that this ache, this longing, this constant pull toward her is something pure, something noble. You say it's connection, destiny, fate. But if you peel back the layers, if you silence the music, the memories, the desperate poetry, what you'll find beneath it all is not passion. It's absence, a void, a quiet, unspoken emptiness you've never learned to name. And she is not the solution. She's the distraction, the mirage that keeps you from looking inward. This is the truth most men never uncover, that the hunger they feel for a woman is often a hunger for themselves. You chase her because you've never turned to face the parts of you that are starving, the parts that feel invisible, inadequate, or lost. She becomes the light you run toward because you are terrified of the dark inside you. But no woman, no matter how radiant, can illuminate the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. And the more you chase her to avoid your own shadows, the darker those shadows grow. Diogenes understood this. That's why he mocked desire, not because he was above love, but because he saw how easily it could be weaponized against the soul. He knew that romantic hunger unchecked is not a sign of aliveness, but of avoidance. He didn't fear solitude. He didn't need an audience to feel whole. He confronted his emptiness head on, laughed at it, lived with it, stripped it of its power. And in doing so, he became whole. But you've been trained to fill the silence with noise, with texting, swiping, waiting, hoping. You've mistaken stimulation for intimacy. Every unread message feels like a judgment. Every glance from her becomes a verdict on your worth. And when she leaves, it's not her absence that breaks you. It's the silence she leaves behind, a silence that reminds you of how much of yourself you never really knew. This isn't love. This is escape, a desperate attempt to avoid the one relationship you've always run from, the one with your own soul. Until you sit with that emptiness and name it, you'll keep calling your craving for distraction love. But Diogenes would see through it. He would laugh not to humiliate you, but to wake you. Because the man who runs from himself will chase anything and call it romance. You call it passion, the effort, the waiting, the emotional labor you pour into her. You call it romantic, the way you anticipate her needs, soften your tone, shrink your desires to fit hers. But what if it's not passion? What if it's not love? What if it's something far more dangerous, something you've been conditioned to call virtue, but is actually the slow surrender of your power? Because that's what's really happening, isn't it? You think you're fighting for her, but you're only fighting against yourself. Each time you mute your truth to seem agreeable, each time you act out of fear of upsetting her, you're not expressing love, you're performing obedience. You're trading your sovereignty for proximity. And the tragedy is, you believe this makes you noble, but she doesn't see a warrior when you kneel. She sees a man who fears himself too much to be honest. Diogenes wouldn't have called this love. He would have called it submission wrapped in perfume. He saw through the performance. While other men rehearsed lines and polished masks, he urinated in public, barked like a dog, lived like a madman. Not because he lacked shame, but because he refused to play by rules that castrated the spirit. His madness was clarity. His rebellion was truth. He wanted to reveal the absurdity of what men do for approval. And what you do every day is just that absurd. You change your clothes, your tone, your plans, your opinions just to keep her interest. You call it compromise. She sees it as erosion. The man who once had a spine becomes a puddle at her feet. And the worst part, you believe this will make her stay. But women, like all humans, are drawn to strength, not control, but groundedness. Not aggression, but presence. Your willingness to bend doesn't magnetize her. It repels her. Because anything that chases too eagerly loses value. And anything that needs her to feel whole will never feel like home. You thought effort would earn her love. But real love cannot be earned through self-erasure. So the next time you confuse passion with persistence, ask yourself, are you acting out of strength or fear? Because love without boundaries is not love, it's desperation. And Diogenes would rather die in solitude than live as a man owned by longing. You were told that a good man is obedient, that he listens, adapts, adjusts always, that his strength lies in his ability to endure, to serve, to sacrifice. And so you did. You softened your voice. You bent your spine. You became agreeable, predictable, reliable, and eventually invisible. You were told this made you strong, that this made you good. But the truth is, it made you forget who you are. Because masculinity, true masculinity, is not measured by how much you give up to be loved. It's measured by how unwavering you remain in the face of that very temptation. A man's power isn't in his willingness to obey, but in his ability to choose. Sovereignty, that's the word. Not dominance, not aggression, but sovereignty, the unshakable ownership of your thoughts, your desires, your direction. The kind of presence that doesn't beg to be seen but cannot be ignored. The kind of clarity that doesn't adjust to fit another's comfort, but invites the world to align with its truth. Diogenes embodied this. When the most powerful man in the known world, Alexander the Great, approached him and offered to grant him any wish, Diogenes didn't kneel. He didn't flatter. He didn't seize the moment to advance his position. He simply said, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." That wasn't arrogance. That was masculine sovereignty, the refusal to be impressed, seduced, or owned. That's the kind of man the world rarely sees. Not because he's rare by nature, but because most men have traded that sovereignty for a chance to be liked. You chase women not because you love them, but because you hope their love will validate your existence. You alter yourself to be chosen. You compromise what's essential in hopes of being called enough. And slowly, you dissolve. But a sovereign man does not dissolve. He stands. He does not chase love, he invites it. He does not perform, he reveals. He does not fear being alone because he has befriended his solitude. That's the man Diogenes saw in his dreams, not a puppet pulled by desire, but a force unshaken by it. A man who can sit in the sun, own his silence, and still feel complete because his masculinity does not require applause. It requires truth. Modern dating is no longer a search for truth. It's a stage, and you've become the actor. The moment you open an app, the curtain rises. Swipe right say, the clever line offer the curated version of yourself. Hide the need. Mask the fear. Perform the role. You aren't looking for connection, not really. You're looking for approval wrapped in affection. You're trying to be chosen not for who you are, but for how convincingly you can play the part. This is the quiet tragedy no one speaks about, that most men aren't dating from authenticity, but from fear. Fear of being unseen, fear of being forgotten, fear of being alone. So they decorate their cages with charm and wit, hoping someone will come along and say, yes, you are enough. But cages are still cages no matter how beautifully they're furnished. You smile through rejection. You rewrite text 5 times to avoid sounding too much. You pretend you don't care when you care deeply. You offer love like a salesman offers discounts desperately, with hope masked as confidence. But women don't fall for performances. They may applaud them, they may entertain them, but deep down they feel the falseness. And they leave not because they're cruel, but because something about it doesn't feel grounded, doesn't feel real. Diogenes saw this long before Tinder or text bubbles. He saw men polishing themselves into forgettable statues, smooth, dull, and soulless. He saw how men became less alive the more they tried to be accepted, and he refused to play along. He stripped himself of performance, of status, of presentation. Not to shock, but to remember what it felt like to simply exist without acting. That's what you've forgotten, how to exist without performance. You've been clapping so long for approval that your hands are bleeding. But the silence you're afraid of, that's where the truth waits. That's where your real voice lives. Until you stop performing, no woman will ever truly see you, because what she's seeing is a mask, and what you've lost is the man underneath. Diogenes didn't beg for applause. He barked to remind people they were pretending. So maybe the question isn't, how do I get her to like me? Maybe it's, who am I when no one's watching? Because if the only time you feel loved is when you're acting, then maybe it's not love at all. Maybe it's just a fear of being yourself. You've been told that power comes from accumulation, more money, more success, more attention, more love. That the man who has the most is the man who wins. So you chase, you acquire, you attach your identity to what you can attract. But what if everything you've been told about power is wrong? What if true power isn't in getting everything, but in needing nothing? This was the essence of Diogenes. He owned nothing. Not a home, not possessions. Not even the illusion that he needed to be loved to be whole. He slept in a barrel, ate scraps, laughed at kings. When Alexander the Great offered to grant him any wish, he didn't ask for status or security. He simply said, "Stand out of my sunlight." That one sentence exposed a deeper truth. The most dangerous man is the one who cannot be bought. The man who needs nothing cannot be controlled. And yet you give everything away before anyone even asks. You give her your time, your energy, your mind space. You bend your goals around her preferences. You silence your needs so she might find you more palatable. You do all this thinking it makes you worthy. But to her and to the world, it only signals one thing: you are ruled by need. And where there is need, there is weakness. This isn't a call to apathy. It's a call to return. Return to the man beneath the hunger. Return to the self that remembers how to stand alone. Because only when you no longer need her to see your worth do you become someone worth seeing. You stop orbiting. You stop begging. You start radiating something rare, presence without performance. Diogenes didn't need love to prove he was lovable. He didn't need luxury to feel rich. He didn't chase because he had nowhere to go. He was home in himself. And that is where your power lives, not in how many want you, but in how little it matters. The man who needs nothing is not empty. He is full of himself, of truth, of clarity. He walks into rooms and shifts the air, not because he demands attention, but because his silence is no longer tied to anyone else's voice. And that more than charm, more than effort, more than romance is what makes a man unforgettable. The greatest prison isn't built with walls, it's built with belief. And the belief that has trapped more men than poverty, war, or failure is this: if I am loved, I will finally be enough. It sounds poetic. It sounds innocent. But that illusion has broken more masculine spirits than any sword ever could. Because when you believe your worth must be validated by someone else's affection, you hand over the keys to your identity and call it romance. This is where most men remain asleep. They keep chasing what they think will redeem them: the perfect girl, the perfect relationship, the feeling of finally being chosen. But it never lasts. The high fades. The glow dims. The chase resets. And they find themselves exhausted not from loving too much, but from believing too much in a dream that was never theirs to begin with. To awaken is to unlearn, to peel back the layers of conditioning that taught you to serve, to please, to prove. It's not bitterness, it's clarity. It's remembering that you were someone long before she looked at you. And if she walks away, you are still someone not less, not broken, not unworthy. Just a man who no longer needs a mirror to know he exists. Diogenes was already free because he never accepted the illusion. He didn't need to be admired to feel whole. He didn't perform for love because he had nothing to gain and nothing to lose. That's what real freedom is: not detachment from people, but detachment from the need to be completed by them. Unlearning the illusion is painful. It feels like death. And in many ways, it is the death of the boy who believed love must be earned by shrinking himself. But in that death, something stronger is born. The man who chooses himself, not as an act of revenge, but as an act of awakening. Because the woman you once chased was never the destination, she was the distraction. The true journey was always inward, toward the man waiting beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath the ache. And once you stop chasing what cannot save you, you realize you were never chasing her. You were chasing the permission to finally become yourself. Life lesson: freedom begins where illusion ends. In a culture that celebrates the chase, glorifies sacrifice, and teaches men that love must be earned through effort, many fall into the quiet trap of performing for affection. But the truth is, the moment your identity depends on someone else's approval, you've already lost yourself. Real strength isn't found in how hard you try to win someone's heart. It's found in your ability to walk away when chasing costs you your self-respect. Love is not a stage where you audition for worthiness. The man who knows who he is doesn't need to be chosen, he chooses. He doesn't orbit her attention. He stands in his own presence. This isn't about rejecting women. It's about refusing to abandon yourself in the process of loving them. Because when you stop needing a relationship to feel whole, you finally become someone worth being in one. The journey isn't about finding the one. It's about becoming the man who no longer needs to chase anything to feel like enough. So pause, breathe, ask yourself, who am I without the pursuit? And if the answer is unclear, that's where your real work begins.